transfer, and I tried to put a program together over the last year where we invite key vice presidents in my area to come over and talk about their strategy on one hand, but also talk about what technologies they're looking at over the next 1 to 3 years as a way of helping all the researchers design research that's relevant to where the technologies are going, and also be able to provide advice to David Thompson's organization in this case as to what the best directions to go as he designs his server strategy. Now, all of these, since it's being recorded for everyone that's going to hear this in the remote labs, this is relevant to you too. I've just done two trips to Beijing and to Cambridge to review their demos, so I know that some of the technology that they're doing is also relevant. So this is going to be recorded, sent out to them, and they'll see this as well. So everyone has an idea across all our labs of what the strategy is. I've worked with David Thompson a little bit on the product side and a lot on the research side to help technology transfer happen in a number of areas. And he's been quite a research advocate over the last couple of years, and he's fairly tied into what we're doing. The problem right now is he's trying to ship this server product, Windows XP Server, and at the moment I don't know how open he is to our feedback because he's got ship pressure. So I really appreciate him taking time out of his day to come over and present this. And with that, I'll have him start. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Good afternoon. And I'll just give you a little more background on myself. I have been at Microsoft for almost 12 years now. I have worked in the Windows group, or actually in NT and then Windows, since September 1990, and this is my 6th release of NT and Windows. And let me start by thanking the research team for all the great things that you guys have done for us over the years. There's countless examples where you've helped us with performance and security and some of the scale-out technologies we're doing now. There's many great engagements, I think great models for the transfer of technology and ideas from research into the product group, and we appreciate that. That's why I certainly was more than happy to invest the time to come today. I will, with respect to shipping the .NET Server, we are going through a complete scrub of the code base in February for security bugs. So if anybody wants to help, you come on over. I guarantee we can put you to work. So I'll make one other sort of confession, and that is I put these slides together myself. Now, you guys, if you do a presentation, you always put the slides together yourself. I do enough presentations and other things that I don't usually do that, and this is a one-off, in essence, for me, a one-off presentation. I tried to put together what I thought was best for you guys. It's not going to be as polished as it might be. You're never supposed to apologize up front, but let me use that as a way of inviting you to make it as interactive as you'd like to. I don't have any problem with being interrupted, asking questions as we go, and because I guess we're recording it, I'll try and repeat the questions as we do that. So what I'm going to do is first kind of frame the business, okay? And this is the way, this is kind of our current thinking about the business is that it falls into 3 buckets, into the knowledge worker, the application platform, and the IT infrastructure bucket. Now, in reality, the Windows Server product is, I don't even have a count off the top of my head, it's probably 12 or 15 different fundamental servers that people use it for. They use it for dial-in, they use it for DNS, they use it for file service, they use it for web service, they use it for Win32 application servers with things like SQL or line of business apps on top. And they've used it as a directory server, they use it as a public key infrastructure certificate server. So it's used in a media server. I mean, as I keep going, I just keep thinking of different views. But to think about the business and help us make business decisions, we at a top level structured into these 3 major buckets. Knowledge worker infrastructure is about the collaboration services that people use in businesses, right? And today that's embodied in a couple of different ways. Simple file sharing is actually the most common thing that's a piece of the infrastructure. Now, you know, we have Active Directory. We could say we're in the directory business. We're not really in the directory business, as Steve likes to tell us, or at least in NT4 particularly. In Active Directory, we tried to grow the capability. But fundamentally, it was just security infrastructure for the file server business. This is, overall, our business is about $2.3 billion at this point. And probably a little more than half of that, maybe close to 2/3 of that, is actually in file services of one sort or another. A large piece of that is this knowledge worker file infrastructure, and that's why that's actually a very major focus of our business going forward. And as I talk about some of the investments we're going to make for Longhorn, the next version, you'll see that. Okay. Some other elements of the knowledge worker infrastructure that are key is it's very important that those infrastructure products be deployable both from the top down by IT folks, because they're the business decision makers in common infrastructure in corporations like Microsoft, but also the thing that traditionally has driven our business, our server business, to be so successful is what you could call grassroots deployment. The fact that a department can make an independent decision. And in fact, I talked about the directory really being an adjunct to the file server business. In NT4, the phenomenon was that, in fact, these little directories or these domains were set up by a bunch of independent organizations. And then the problem became, of course, when people wanted to collaborate with some common context between those domains, they had to stitch those things together, which we let them do, but then they ran into scalability limits, practical scalability limits. They did that, and that's what drove us to build Active Directory. And then the last element of that is we, as file sharing, you could think of us as the platform for Office in a very minor way, looking backwards. And then today we've taken a step forward. STS, the SharePoint Team Services, are kind of in the .NET server, the current version of the collaboration for documents that run on top of the Windows .NET server. But in Longhorn, a major focus is to build a richer set of collaboration services as the underlying platform for Office in Longhorn. And that's a major piece of our strategy. Application platform, our focus, or the way to describe this is our vision is that we want to build a platform that's the best platform to develop, deploy, and operate application services or integrate our web services at any scale. And that set of words imply a whole lot of things. First off, in the .NET server, we host the .NET framework on the Windows .NET server. It comes in the box. It can also be installed on Windows 2000. It's actually higher performance, more integrated policy management and security when you put it on the .NET server. But that's around the ease of development. We don't develop that, but that's a key piece of our application server strategy. That's essentially the next Win32. Deploy, in fact, one of the technology, in fact, even staff transfers from research into our team was an effort called BIG, which is about deployment and then operation of scale-out, multi-tiered implementations of application services. So it covers both deployment and operational aspects. And in fact, one of the areas that we are also investing outside of BIG is on general management infrastructure that's all about the ongoing operation. One of the things that we've been, I would describe us as being guilty of in the past is not really thinking in nearly as end-to-end fashion as we should. And this really thinks about all the elements of somebody developing, rolling out, and operating through good times, bad times, through scale up and scale down scenarios, the application platform. And then the last piece is we really are breaking out the focus on IT infrastructure because we went beyond the security infrastructure for file services to the common directory for a wide range of services where more than just security information is stored. That still turns out to be the fundamental initial reason that people deploy Active Directory. But then it's got the user information for a wide range of applications, including Exchange as being the most intimately coupled. But then, of course, for any of the other services, it provides authentication services and service discovery. So it's a common. It's used for an ever-expanding range of applications, Microsoft applications and third parties. There's about 100 third parties, which is a small number, by the client application numbers, but in the realm of server applications, and the implications of that tie into our infrastructure, that's actually a pretty large number because these things all stitch together. When you have an infrastructure that applications use, more start to gain more value from it, more of them use it, and pretty soon your infrastructure is indispensable and something that people want to pull in and moreover can't take out once they put in. It's good for the business. So our focus there is on building an infrastructure that lets you build distributed secure services at any scale, and moreover, the watchword moving forward is federation. And the company's gone through this interesting evolution where, we built stuff that was entirely enterprise focused, and then we tried to sort of tried to make it work between companies, and that wasn't very easy to do. And then MSN was born, and they built Passport. They started to think purely about the services world, the heck with this enterprise stuff. That's the old stuff. And now, what they came back to realize that as soon as they delivered Passport, as soon as they started talking about Hailstorm, what companies wanted to do was run their own services, right? And then third parties wanted to run additional additional instances of the services themselves. So federation is the key characteristic going forward. I need to be able to use these services between companies, between consumers and companies. I need to be able to utilize different commercial services, both for Hailstorm and Passport. So federation is a big word for us. Okay, now if you go orthogonal to that across the platform, these things may seem like motherhood and apple pie. I wrote these because I can in my mind start listing large numbers of people that are putting out huge amount of effort on each one of these dimensions. Okay, the theme of absolutely secure and securable. We have. I could talk about that for an hour, but I'll do you a favor, and I won't. I will simply say that the environment's changed. The trade-offs from usability to security have changed. We have, with our customers, particularly in the last 6 months, we have suffered through that transition. And the impact on customers is just unbelievable. This is one area where the research team has been very helpful in terms of tools like Prefix and Prefast. As soon as we actually had some of these problems, Rick called us over and we spent some time. He had done some brainstorming about things, gave us some great ideas in a number of different ways. I'll give you an example of the impact on one customer. It was a large retailer. They got hit by the NIMDA virus, and they didn't take any credit cards for about 3 days. The estimated financial impact of that, since they were a very, very large retailer, about as large as you could imagine, though I can't mention their name, probably the impact was probably about $100 million. And that's just a guess. That's not something they say or that we say, but that's the kind of thing. I mean, there are stories, and Brian Valentine, myself, I mean, we end up having to go out and make calls on these customers, with these customers over phone, talking about the impact of them. I mean, people spent 24-hour days for 4 or 5 days while they got their businesses running again after these viruses. And so we have a very broad-based, full, every dimension we can think of attack on this. An example of how seriously we're taking it is in the month of February. The entire Windows team, all 5,000 people, will be trained and spend time in one way or another poring over the designs, the documentation, and the code in Windows, with the goal being that when the .NET server ships, and feeding that back to XP, feeding back the applicable piece to Win2K, and even in some cases NT4, that we have the most secure platform in the market. Because the impact to our business, I talked about the impact on customers, because to me, thinking about how it affects people's lives is what gives the most impact. But in fact, literally our business is at risk if we don't, entirely at risk if we don't fix these problems. Highly reliable and available. We have a customer satisfaction survey, and it basically says, we have this image and a concern that we're not as reliable as some of the operating system platforms on the market, Solaris or Linux specifically. Turns out some customers, based on how they use it or how they operate it, they get almost no crashes. In the survey, it was, I have 0 crashes per week versus more than 1 or more crashes per week. And our overall satisfaction rating is basically identical to the other platforms, a little higher than one, a little lower than the other. when they're in the zero crashes per week class. So take all the other factors and rule them out. And if they have a reliable experience, that we're at par, and that means that we have some other cases where we know we could improve the OS. We can be more than competitive as a platform. So and in other cases we drop 20 or 30 points as soon as they see any number of crashes. So major factor, simple to deploy and operate. In Windows 2000, we focused on infrastructure and enterprises, but we really took a step backwards in terms of some of the simplicity around the deployment setup of the servers, because they were more sophisticated, but we didn't do a good job of hiding that for specific scenarios. So that's a critically important feature. We have a push on in the .NET Server and beyond to focus on simplicity. The end-to-end experience, part of that it drives part of that simplicity. It drives the thinking about the application platform and all the different phases. It was a key piece of what Rick talked about when we came over to talk about security. He said, well, okay, fine, so we're going to do this, this, and this to mitigate the effects of viruses or prevent attacks through buffer overruns, but it's going to happen. So then the right thing to do is say, well, it's going to happen. Let's look at a way where we can take thousands of machines and restore them with user data in minutes, okay? Maybe with some of the same technologies we're talking about with Big, for example. Okay, so that's a way of thinking about the end-to-end experience, where you don't focus on just technology solution, but really looking at the whole design problem. And then any scale. We're pushing on this in both dimensions, but the need to deploy and run mega services, the platform for integrated web services, that drives very high scale at one end, very low scale in small businesses in terms of simplicity, and then for certain classes of applications and database applications that aren't well partitioned, we need scale up. And so, in fact, we're focusing on scale up as well, but any scale through scale out is really our focus. Last piece of framework, the .NET Server we expect to ship this summer. August is the target date right now. Longhorn in calendar year 04 at some time. Longhorn, the background on Longhorn is that the Longhorn is to be an aligned release, aligned with both Office and Windows, which, when I say aligned, it gives us that opportunity to drive that end-to-end customer experience in the best possible way between the client and the server and Office. Okay, the platform will be open, okay, because as soon as I talk about this, people always start asking me questions about, well, won't we get in trouble? We have antitrust issues. And the key thing is the system's still going to be open, but when we focus on the solution, on making the pieces work together well, the customer's going to have a better experience. Anybody else can replace, complement, add to those pieces of the scenarios, but making our products work together because we focus on making them work together in one time is the key theme here. And then the other thing is that we try where it matters to get the flexibility to deliver interim technology releases or independent products in interim points in that cycle. And then I didn't list it here, but Blackcomb will be the next release beyond Longhorn, and that I won't talk about that today. But as we set the Longhorn plan, because we're lining a number of things, we may end up with a number of things I talked about today essentially being pushed into the Blackcomb release, because lining things up means that somebody's got a constraint. So, and one little piece of trivia: does anybody know where the name Longhorn comes from? So we're working on Whistler, right? You remember that, even though we don't call it Whistler anymore. And Blackcomb was the next release. It turns out that Longhorn is a bar that's physically located at Whistler between the Whistler and Blackcomb Mountain. So it's on the way to Blackcomb. That's a fact.
So
yes?
Thinking of Blackcomb as being around 2006?
Yeah, I don't have a date for Blackcomb. Okay.
I understand that.
Right.
It's order.
Yeah, that's probably about the right way to think about it. For a client release, you can do a client release about every 2 years. You can do a server release about every 3 years, right? And we actually got some interactions, I think, that made some things inefficient this time because we split. And we split and it's actually called the .NET Server and the XP client. We did that because XP was hard against OEM deadlines, and that didn't address the server business. And we want to align those things going forward, if at all possible, or restructure our engineering approach in a way that makes it easier to separate them. Probably the toughest job in Windows, and one of the things I'll talk about is engineering challenges, is the fact that we deliver a lot of things at once. It's a strength and a weakness. So these are some of the technologies I'll talk about in different levels, and my speed through the different sections will vary, and you should stop me as you wish. The other thing I'll say is there are areas here that I know there are people in research that know a lot more about specific areas than I do because they're already engaged in working with the product team. But you can see the list. So secure Windows. And I separate this out from security infrastructure. This is the focus on building a secure platform. Secure boot, using hooks in the hardware, and then verifying that all the code running on the system is actually code that you want to run on the system. This is independent of some of the work being done around something called trusted Windows, which is about protecting content. In fact, it takes the view that it wants to run someplace where, or it can run someplace where it doesn't trust the operating system. But our job is to make sure that the operating system code itself is something you can trust in Windows. We have this inelegant but incredibly tough problem that right now you have to be an admin to install software and things like that, to do the things that users want to do, yet that gives you too much privilege. And that's the problem we have is as the usability, you either make mistakes or you favored usability over security. And as you correct that by either fixing holes or tightening down the system, what happens is things break, right? Because they put stuff in areas that have to be protected for admin because we didn't have a clean enough protected and architected solution. But that's what you carry forward for compatibility. So you have to go and get all the apps changed, and then you ship the system, and some apps don't work. It's an unpleasant experience. But if you get enough critical mass, then you move over that hump. That's the life of a Windows guy. 6 releases worth. WinLogon. I don't need to talk about this a lot, except it's interesting. This is a piece of code that's accreted a huge amount of functionality, and by redesigning it down to the core. That's where policy is. I mean, when you log on, all the stuff that happens in WinLogon. So it's bad for security. It means you have to reboot for QFEs, which go back to reliability. Antivirus, we make sure we have a common infrastructure for those guys. Their performance is terrible. Their reliability used to be the biggest problem, used to be the biggest source of crashes. It's no longer through brute force of bringing them in and spending time debugging with them. Well, we're building an infrastructure that makes it a lot easier to write high-performance, reliable virus checkers. We don't necessarily see that, and there are differing opinions here. Antivirus itself as a great solution for virus problems. I mean, it's a piece of technology that is sort of, it's a cleanup after the horse is out, chases the horse down, I think. Yeah, Dan.
One of the things that people thought about antivirus software and viruses and long assumed is that over time, eventually, you're going to end up with more sophisticated viruses that are basically sort of autoimmune viruses that attack your antivirus system.
Yep. And
the assumption was there was eventually going to be a race, with antivirus software people coming up with more clever ways of attacking. I'm wondering if a common infrastructure for antivirus software might actually turn out to be a barrier against that by essentially creating a common infrastructure that viruses can assume is there and attackable. Whereas if you allow for a more flexible approach to antivirus software, then
I don't think so, but I think, and the reason I don't think so is that when I talk about infrastructure, it's really giving them clean ways to access the file stream and stuff. It's very low-level stuff. It in no way constrains what they do in terms of viruses. It really just it gets some of the stuff that they all have to do anyway out of the way. That's no more attackable than the rest of the system is in that sense. So it's in a sense, if we can actually help them with performance in any way, we might get a little bit more out of that before the race is lost. It is absolutely a race. It's a race today, right? In fact, you can tell it's a race because when I actually boot and log onto my system, eTrust sits there and consumes 100% of the CPU until, and this is off the record, until I kill it with a taskman because I can't wait to do anything else. Which is a bad thing to admit, but it's a problem.
We'll edit that out, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. This is edited, right? System restore, I actually talked about the concept of rebuilding a system up from ashes, if you will, but very quickly and for lots of systems, potentially through the combination of imaging and snapshot technologies. Secure coding tools. There's already a lot of great work in prefix and prefast, and then some of the compilers, and then secure system roles is around how you configure these systems securely and tell what's running on them, and that's one of the other big elements of security issues with customers is that, and we recently announced this STPP thing. It was all about getting patches down to customers because we gave them the patches a month and a half before any of the viruses hit. But you know what? When they put patches on, things break. They can't figure out how to get patches on. It's slow. It's hard. And so their systems weren't patched. And so anybody that actually did keep their systems up to date was not hit. And this happened in organizations in large and small pockets. And anybody that didn't, once it got in the door, they were hosed. So, yep, Dan?
Are you looking at approaches to making patches easier to develop and deploy in a way that makes it less likely to break things, as well as just making it easier to distribute?
Well, we are. We're still using a bit of a brute force approach on that. We're basically doing is we have what we call security roll-up packs, where we do service pack level testing on the minimum set of fixes up to that point, right? Because that is the other side of it. It's an interesting, this is the kind of thinking I'd encourage any contributions to sort of thinking about it at a high level. I had a customer tell me the other day, you know what I think is the right thing is give me a reliable way to back patches out, okay? Because it turns out they don't break things that often. It's just when they do, you sure remember it because it shuts everything down, right? He said, what I'll do is I'll test something for a couple hours on a machine, and then I'll roll it out. And if it breaks stuff, if I can roll it back quickly and reliably, then I'm a happy guy, right? Because it doesn't happen that often. It's a much more cost-effective way of staying up to date. So again, you got to think about the end-to-end experience without constraints. The things we're doing right now are very much just along the same models. The application platform, I said we were focused on scale out. The rack is the computer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think that you guys are probably very familiar with a lot of the work there. Just to give you an update on where we're at, and this was a team of about four people that transferred out of research about a year ago now, and we have about 40 people working on it at this point. And we have actually divided it in two versions so we can move fast, faster. I mean, it never feels like we're moving fast enough. V1 is basically the infrastructure for it, the ability to roll out images and execute scripts on a bunch of machines. It's sort of manual policy, if you will. And then V2 is about dynamic policy and full virtualization of resources beyond servers, but including network resources and storage resources. And we basically have taken the original core team, and they're now doing V2, and we're building out V1 as a product. Clustering, there's a number of. We're basically trying to update the platform to have a common set of services that we can use for any kind of these elements of clustering multiple systems together in any fashion. I sat through a review the other day, and I guess it took me way too long to get this, but the big challenge these guys have is they're always in catch-up mode. Okay, somebody designs a service, and then these guys try to get those guys to make it run in a clustered, highly available failover scenario, and they spend lots of time chasing down bugs, as opposed to anybody puts a service in where clustering is applicable, they make it work in a cluster before the service goes into the OS. So that's a hump we have to get over. I would welcome any thinking about that as well. At the end, I have one slide that shows an org chart, shows basically who to go back to on these things. Security infrastructure, I talked about federation between organizations as being the key. And it comes back to this user scenario where, I don't know about you, but I'm frequently losing track of the various passwords, usernames, and stuff that you use for the different services, and some of which are not particularly critical or secure, but it's just a pain in the neck. when you go back to the thing a year and a half later to use it, and you don't know how to use it. So this is about basically giving you the user this view for their persona. They can access things at work, across business partners, as a consumer, and in any way. So the key elements of that are trust management. Passport brokering is an example of that. Public key, cross-forest trusting. And then this is in the enterprise, federating the infrastructure in the enterprise with Active Directory and its Kerberos authentication, and then Passport for consumers. And in fact, the next version of Passport is going to cut over to use the Kerberos protocols. So we work pretty closely with that group. A couple other key elements in the security infrastructure. Auditing. Every day at Microsoft, let me see if I get this number right, they collect 120 million events, okay? And about 100 million of those, maybe a little more, are security auditing events where you have to collect this data to trace back. And it doesn't scale. They've built systems themselves to do this in a kind of a one-off way. And so the things that we need to focus on is a secure, non-reputable infrastructure and a very scalable way to collect it and squirrel it away. It's one of those where I want to dump it away efficiently and then go back to it when I need to, as opposed to spending a lot of time storing it, because the flow is just immense. Authorization. We have our access control in the system is outdated, to say the least. And role-based authentication or authorization is what everybody wants. We have that core infrastructure in the .NET server, and we'll build on that for different kinds of services. Gideon.
You mentioned the business of keeping track of 53 different passwords on 53 different machines.
Yep.
Terran Speed has pretty much the right fix for that, which, if you're in crypto, it's a three-liner to explain, but
Sure.
You may want to steal his clothes.
So you want to tell me what it is? Or you
Yes.
want
It's on his machine, he has his own master password.
Right.
Using it, he encrypts or hashes the URL he's going to, and that's the password he gives that URL. And if you do it right, there's no way to work backwards.
I see.
Now, of course, if a URL insists that the password be written in Manchurian, right, there may be a problem.
Now, then the other question is, are you telling me something that Terrence developed after he left Microsoft or before?
He did it for himself.
He gave me on my machine while he was here.
So we have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The advantage is it's completely stateless. You just
Yes.
the same master password.
No. The thing we do today is in the system we have a thing that we manage a collection of state with. But that I guess the same approach work for any kind of credentials or just web access.
Basically meant for web access.
Yeah.
If you have a unique name for the place you're going to, you can do it.
Okay. Well, that's good. I actually didn't know about that. I learned something already. Okay. Directory. In Active Directory, one of the things we're doing is creating what we call it I think we call it ADAM, Application Directory, something or other. Anyway, basically take the directory, make it a service, not a piece of the security infrastructure in the box, and then you can use it with websites and stuff in an easy to use way with the same programming model. And then a lot of the work is going on in MMS, and George Robertson is involved with this work as well. But meta directory, in fact, the biggest problem the meta directory has right now is that we haven't shipped it. We bought a company called Zoomit about 2.5 years ago now, and we have that version in the field. There's a few hundred very large customers, and the number of customers for this is not going to be huge at first, but over time we expect it to expand. But we've done a re-implementation to use the Microsoft scripting languages. SQL is a store. It has its own store. It has a lot of its own homegrown technology. But it's taken longer to do than we wanted to. But it's basically MMS is the integration point for directories. And in fact, over time, I think one of the things is we've learned a lot about directories through experience. A central directory where everything is deposited is not necessarily the best technical solution. It seems like the simplest rather than synchronizing things. On the other hand, it couples everything together. Right? We found in the early days of the Exchange rollout is people had applications that were poorly written and would essentially consume the resources of the directory. Denial of service accidents, as opposed to attacks, might be the right word. But because it was a central database that everything was sharing, it was susceptible to that. Cleaner, but susceptible to that. Whereas an approach where applications essentially have their own directories, and MMS flows the common data, essentially manages the common data, so you have a unified view of the common data, like the user, all the elements of the user attribute. But you've got the decoupling and independence, and in fact, you deal with all the issues of legacies and different technical requirements and things as well, different locality, and use the directory, use Active Directory as for things that need to be global. Typically, things in discovery or security, or getting your handhold onto where to go, but not putting a lot of data in there. So MMS is pretty key, and then this polyarchy, which I'll describe in one sentence, and then George, you may have done talks on it here, I don't know, but it's about essentially about ways of taking all that data, which is now in one place in the enterprise. It's actually quite a rich and valuable collection of data, and having ways to sort of automatically look at it based on the properties you can discover, and then have very flexible ways to look at it from different dimensions. And polyarchy is sort of the antithesis of what you could call, one hierarchy, which is what Active Directory has. Another thing we learned is that the different applications that use it organize the data differently, right? That want to organize it differently. And when we tried to use the same organization that we used for security administration for things like desktop policy administration, it didn't really work very well. Would you add anything to that, George, or is that?
We're going to be showing it at TechFest, so everybody will get a chance. If you haven't seen it, you'll get a chance to see it there.
All right, so you'll see it at TechFest. And I talked about it being the central repository of data, or the switch basically that flows. It knows ownership, it brokers, converts the data in the namespace. The intention is it's the authoritative master, or can be the first step on the hub. Where you might have an HR system that's actually the origin of the first piece of user data, flows into that, and then MMS as a hub flows it out. And then the last thing is, as we looked at the deployment of web services between companies, say the scenario of an individual joining a company and then having a healthcare provider and a doctor, all of which have their own independent web services, that MMS could be used as a technology to flow the right data, just the subset of the right data, between those independent organizations to give you the uniform view. So the user gets a consistent view of services across those organizations. So that's another key scenario downstream. This is a pretty complicated picture that shows some of the things. In fact, I want to move ahead a slide, I think. Wait just a minute here. Where did I use it? This is, what's that? This is a case of the one slide that I wanted to start with is not in the right place. So, in fact, just hang on a second here. Like you got, I guess you could leave, but can't make it go any faster. I don't know where it is. I think it's gone. All right. Well, what I wanted to say about storage, the set of things we lump into storage are a combination of file services, block structured storage, and this is, remember I said file services are at the core of what we, are at the core of our file server business. We got more than $1 billion worth of file server business alone. At the same time, storage has become cheap. Storage is huge in organizations because of all different applications that consume it. And what that's done is driven storage management to the top problem in a lot of IT organizations. And the net result in a business sense is that companies like EMC make disproportionate amounts of money on storage management, and then the storage actually becomes the driving decision in an organization. And so that is not good for our business. It's not good for customers because they've got to pay too much money. In fact, I mean, the key to our business has been of course, being a fairly central platform, but as well driving value up and cost down in the whole ecosystem, right? I mean, it's the commoditization of hardware. Well, the commoditization of storage is the thing that needs to happen right now. And in fact, the hardware OEMs will come to us and say that to them, this is one of the biggest problems. There's a lot of confusion right now because there's not a small number of clear paths forward in storage architecture. There are a bunch of different proprietary solutions that, as I said, have disproportionate cost. And so the things we're focused on, and the slide I'm missing would tell you this, our storage strategy, is about commoditization of storage through common infrastructure in Windows that can make it easier for people to choose storage, to choose the fabric you connect it with, and manage it consistently so that applications can see a common view. Another key element of our storage strategy is around storage management in the day-to-day things. Like one of the features that's in the .NET server is time warp. It's called shadow copy. It's called a couple different things. But basically, it's snapshot technology. And we can't call it snapshot externally, I think, because somebody's trademarked that. It may be network appliance. In fact, one of our competitors. And so the feature is that you can actually call up a version of the file share from some earlier time at any time, right? And through the shell, you can say, I want it. There's a property you can pull up and say, hey, I want to pick a different date, and that's assuming that this thing has been set up to take snapshots of that file share, or that volume, actually. It's a volume-level snapshot. So this shows the pieces of the architecture that will drive towards this vision around things like the fabric virtualization. Today, there's different switches and ways to control those on block storage area networks. The virtualization of disk services pops up a level and is as one of the key things to being able to have the platform and the application manage the storage itself in a scenario like Big, where you have essentially when you get to a vision where you have a rack full of computers, a rack full of storage, an application that knows how to draw from those resources as appropriate within the constraints of an overall manager. And this shows the time frame these things are coming out, right? The yellow pieces are in there today. Fabric virtualization is coming in Longhorn, potentially before that. These are vendor-provided pieces, drivers specific to their type of device, specific to the switch, for example. This environment, the filter driver, the antivirus filter driver environment is what I was talking about for infrastructure to make it easier for those guys. So you may have heard about Longhorn storage. One of the things we did as an investigation to determine whether or not we should align the Office and Windows schedules was spend some time looking at how to build a richer store for Office applications, for SharePoint, basically, or for SharePoint-like products. And the task force and now a development group have started on work on basically an integration of the file system and SQL Server in the form of Mighty Mouse. And there's a transacted file system as a part of that picture. I won't talk about this in any depth, but basically the properties that are associated with a file, the rich properties that are used in a scenario like that, are actually carried with a file and then promoted in the local store, and then you can query those through the SQL Server, which is a pretty basic thing to do, but is really the first stepping stone to an integrated richer store downstream post Longhorn. Then we have stepping up a level. We're trying to deliver, and you'll see that there's a bunch of thinking in flux right now about how to do this. But at a high level, what we're trying to provide is this collaboration-based platform, and then the different elements of the end-to-end platform for document sharing, with the natural organization, sharing some of the features you need in terms of versioning as you work on the same documents, notifications that somebody else changed it, Digital rights management, the Office team has looked at taking that technology and applying to documents carried with them so that you can mail a document around and still nobody else can access it unless they've been enabled through that. And then in the .NET Server, we have the first version of real-time communications services. And those as an integrated piece of the collaboration experience, where you say you want to collaborate in a document, you share the document. And you can converse with video and audio services. But integrating that with making it very easy to launch, the user experience, to launch that appropriately off the document or object collaboration. So the thing that's in flux is that as we were looking at this and looking at some of the things that were being developed in the constructs of Hailstorm, the question we have is whether or not the Hailstorm services are the right set of services to use for these information services as essentially the protocols or the base for the protocols on top of storage. And the Office guys were looking at this path. Kodiak, the next version of Exchange, we're looking at this path. That path is under what you could call deep discussion right now. And I think I also presume you're familiar with the Hailstorm services. The Hailstorm team is actually part of the .NET Server team as of about a month ago. But they had evolved. In fact, the way that they ended up here was they had evolved past this delivering a mega service to the reality that they had to deliver a version of the service in the enterprise and commercially and federate together. And the natural place to do that was in Windows. So I won't go into that in any kind of depth. Probably one of the biggest problem areas we have had historically because of the way the system has grown up is around systems management. And in deploying Windows systems in large numbers, in simple scale out in scenarios, it's our Achilles heel by far. In fact, this is some elements of a talk I gave at a recent internal conference where we humor is allowed. But the title of my talk, which somebody else titled for me, invited me to give, was Systems Management: Why It's Going to Suck Less. I lost that title in this particular presentation. I think a few of you saw it or knew that we did it. But we're basically we've sort of been stuck in this world where we grew things up independently, and we didn't have a clean architectural model for management. And there is some very good work that's happened in thinking around some of the key areas, but not all the areas. I don't know if you, Mark Brown was the Active Directory architect, is now the management architect in the server group. We moved the management infrastructure teams into the server group back in October. And so we're focusing, starting with fundamentals, but to basically build a coherent strategy for management infrastructure that for the system, focused around fundamentally keeping the system in a good state. The key thing is that all the components need to be as self-manageable as possible. I think of BIG as an infrastructure for building self-manageable components, except where a component is a lot of computers, a lot of different kinds of computers implementing a multi-tiered application. So think of the self-management as the stuff that's inside the service, which could be BIG implemented, and then management being the outside elements. So we deal with the adding and removing components, and then the things that happen between components that aren't self-manageable. When you try to do this, the situation today, I said it was a tough problem. The reasons is that the state for these components is all over the place. It's impossible to tell how to change it. A lot of times there's a GUI tool to manage something, and the reason it's the only thing that manages it because it does some poking at some places in the registry that it knows about, and maybe there's an API for the service it's talking to. Our system, relative to others, because of the democratic way in which we develop systems against the pace of the PC industry, tends to have lots of features, lots of components, oftentimes smaller ones. One of the things that we've done in the .NET Server that's brute force, simple, but maybe one of the more valuable things is we've turned off every service you don't need. we used to turn them all on because then you for sure wouldn't have to worry about the user finding them because they were there. Of course, they increased the security attack surface. They consumed memory. They degraded reliability. And in general, it confused people as they started poking around and said, oh, that must be something I need to turn on or off or change somehow. And then lastly, the history is we built this multi-user system. But you can tell from the outset that when we did profiles, it wasn't really designed to have multiple users. Then we did terminal service and flushed out the rest of the multiple user issues. Departmental servers were really designed to be installed and set up in somebody's office as opposed to rolled out in racks. So we made some progress with a number of pieces in .NET. There's headless support, command line support. We have products now, and this actually is a very important piece of this that I'll get to in a minute. But the essence of the problem is in the past few years, we've made pretty good progress in terms of scalability, the ability to run on large systems, in reliability in Windows 2000, but we have not made commensurate advancement in manageability. And that's what our customers tell us. So remember the title of the talk was Why It's Going to Suck Less. So I maintained that the thing that was going to make it be different this time was that there were two things. There was a push and a pull. The push is the driver. There are a couple of things that are forcing us to do a good job of this. One is security. Security in and of itself is a form of manageability in terms of configuration management. But you have to have a reliable way to roll out fixes. You have to be able to configure things to reduce configuration mistakes and to reduce attack surface. And another example of push, I met with ITG and some of their favorite auditors, Bill and Steve, on last Monday for a couple hours. And they described how Exchange, DNS, Active Directory, wireless networking with public key infrastructure all had to work for our mail service to work. And that there were so many moving parts that without an automatic, scalable, reliable way of managing it, they simply couldn't deliver the service. And they submitted as evidence of that the availability numbers for Exchange at Microsoft. Now, there are other factors because we use dog food software and stuff, but it was a very compelling argument. We are in a business that is now too complex for the manageability that our product supports. That's the push. And on the pull, having these tools there actually means you get value and you can see how to make your system manageable. The example of that is that MOM, the Microsoft Operations Manager, has an infrastructure for rules that will sit there and look at the event system, changes in state, and you can take action or provide information to the user. You distill it down to the things they need to know. And that's, if you want to know what event management is, in reality, it's workflow. Okay, you can talk about all this thing in an abstract way if you want, but you go to ITG, and they have built a system that takes these 120 million events, and at the end, what happens is somebody sits at the terminal, and stuff pops up. And when it pops up, what they want is to pop up the stuff that person has to do something about. And they don't want to pop up anything they don't have to do something about, and they want to be clear what they have to do when it pops up. Right? That's what event management is about, and there's a lot of complexity to take that 120 million and turn it into the 40 or 50 that somebody has to do something about every day. Right? When a section of the network fails, he doesn't need to see the 5,000 events that are generated. He needs to see one. Right? So you have this tool. We have MOM, and with Active Directory, we built this distributed system with insufficient tools to manage it. So our guys started working on a MOM knowledge pack, basically, or a management pack. And along the way, they improved the WMI provider, this instrumentation. But they didn't really, the improvement of the instrumentation was driven by using the system, trying to implement the knowledge, and affecting the changes back into the management infrastructure of the product itself. Without that loop, without the value immediately obvious and pulling through, it wouldn't have happened. So the fact that we did not have management tools, both in the box and in our stable of products over the years, is one of the things, where we counted on third parties. It's one of the reasons our system has not been pulled through to be manageable. So that's why I guess the key point of this is that you have to have the right set of tools in the box to pull through, the right infrastructure, and then the guide that we will write is essentially the thing that points you in a path between those two. And that's that you don't put anything in the guide that doesn't result in specific value to ISVs or specific differences in what they could do. This is an example where we're, one of the things we worry about is what do we put in the box? What do we charge for charge extra money for in terms of the add-on products? Well, I told you that the instrumentation doesn't make it administrable. There's a bunch of raw data there, and it turns out you need that raw data at different times for different tasks. But it's unusable by anybody but experts. So you need a monitoring system. There's no one monitoring system, so that the people that understand the app don't have a cost-effective way to take their knowledge and embody it in a product. If we put that core knowledge infrastructure, that ability to execute these rules and do basic monitoring in the system, then all of a sudden the ISV who writes a service will have a place where they can do this once and get immediate value back from it. And that'll drive the manageability of the ecosystem in such a way to turn it from a liability into an asset. And then we're working on things. The things we're working on are in these dimensions. Software distribution is going to be grown out of Windows Update, the model that you can flow patches out to Windows systems inside your enterprise or out automatically. Configuration and state, so you get a single repository, but then basically the ability to access through, as described by an application manifest, the legacy storage in the transition period. Monitoring we talked about. A UI platform that's not essential to this, but offers an easy way to build things more consistent for a user that's composable, both in the GUI form and in the command shell form, and is schema-driven. And that's one of the areas where we could use some help, I suspect. The last area that I'll talk about in terms of work we're focused on is really around engineering. Testing, the ratio of testers, and actually there are more testers than developers in Windows. It's probably 2 to 1. The actual, if you think about program managers, testers, localizers, it's about, I think it's about 4 to 1 in Windows. So this infrastructure to do all the other stuff around the product, aside write the code, is expensive. Testing is the most expensive. Testing is always the limit to being able to ship a product. Now, you can push that back to the way the product's designed, and that's fine. Let's think about that as all one part of the problem. But fundamentally, when we go to make changes, this is the thing that bites us. When we go to make fixes, it's the thing that makes patches unreliable, is we don't have cost-effective ways to test the system. We build a system that is probably more complex, has more usability, more configurations, that it supports and is used in than any other system in the world. So there's a whole Windows architecture team. In fact, Amitabh's team is involved with a lot of this work in different dimensions, in modeling, in tools to analyze code for testability, in code injection. I guess Magellan is a project that I think that his team is working on. Test lab management is, for us to move from one building to another. The IS team, I'll give you an example. We wanted to move them to another building because we had changed the organization. To move the lab was going to cost us $1 million. Okay, so we're not moving them. Okay, well, you do that long enough, and you start to lose the $1 million in terms of the interaction between the team and other teams in ways that matters. And so we really want to do is get to the point where a test lab is off in a building somewhere and is just a factory full of resources that can be used through deployment things like BIG to automate, to assign resources and run tests in very complex configurations for speed, repeatability, and utilization of resources. The $1 million is cheap, by the way. That's what often happens, or used to happen in the older days, is that we couldn't get power in buildings. You couldn't move, or you had to reroute power in, which cost a lot more than $1 million. So test labs are something you don't want to have to move around with people. So if you want to, David Yee actually is the guy driving that across Windows and happens to be in my group. So this just touches on describes the different areas if you want to follow up. Eugene Ho is responsible for the program management across the server. David Yee does infrastructure testing and is responsible for cross-server testing. Application platform, which is IIS clustering, and BIG is in Bill Lang's group. Ben Favi is the file services. It turns out Bob Muglia recently joined the platforms group and is driving a storage business and actually works very closely with us, driving infrastructure into the server product, but then also will do additional products in this area we talked about where there's disproportionate cost today. Hailstorm, Eric Lockhart manages that team. Mark Lukowski, as a lot of you know, is the architect. Bharat Shah, management director. Chuck Chan is directory and meta directory. Doug Bayer's got security, both infrastructure and the secure Windows team, the team that's training all these folks and driving that February security push. IT management tools, Donna Liu, and then terminal services, which I didn't mention, but there's work for Longhorn there, is Peter Bergler. So, last slide. How can you help? You know, I think I separate this into a few buckets, or roll it up into a few buckets. We have fundamental challenges for customers around building the most secure systems in the industry, the most reliable, the most manageable, the most self-managing. Those are tough challenges. And we could definitely use some help there. Innovation around storage and information services. That's the differentiation. I mean, I talked about our file service and our focus there. I guess the thing I left out is that essentially the simple file service is commoditized by Linux, and that's where we face competition. Not always as simple as you might think, but that's one of the key competitive points. And then lastly, for a project the size of Windows, we face fundamental engineering issues in terms of the way we structure and build systems and testability as a way of measuring sort of how things are designed more than anything else. So that's, there are a lot of ways you can help. There are a lot of ways you have helped. I want to again express appreciation for that and encourage you to toss any good ideas our way. Any questions? Gideon.
Ambitious goals in testability and even more in security. Do you think you can do it in as unsafe a language as C?
Do I think we can do it in C?
It's an unsafe language where we do anything and like expecting to defend the book.
Yeah, I think like anything else, as we have more options available, it's like with C# and manageable and managed code, we would certainly choose to implement things in those environments. I think managed code offers great opportunities, and so as we move forward, I don't know that we'll go back and convert lots of things to managed code, but we're writing anything new in managed code, and I would pay the price to convert in places. Some of the tools we're using for MMS are new, right? They're all in managed code. The thing we need to do is we need to set it up so that there are two things I think we need to do. One is have as few people as possible writing stuff that is exposed to security issues. The IIS guys took a lot of heat. That was for two reasons. One, because IIS was really a conglomeration of a bunch of things, but also because IIS was out at the outside, right? And so the pipes to the outside, I think we want to make sure there are a few of those. They're very well engineered, and they're probably got to be in C, right? Or languages that are more raw, right? But quickly they need to go up into more protected environments for the larger number of programmers to work with. Yes?
Are there plans to integrate or unify kind of your passport identity and the Windows domain identity, your login identity?
Yeah, there absolutely is an intention to do that. In fact, today in the client you do that. With XP, right? You log on. And you can sign up for a passport, and those things are bound together on the client side through the credential manager. The other thing that we will do is federate passport in a way where passport IDs can be used internally in an enterprise using the Active Directory infrastructure underneath. So you can use the same set of tools to manage access and for applications to talk to. We've essentially been authenticated by passport. And then passport can be a broker in that sense between organizations the same way. So. Yes.
One of the services that is off by default is indexing services. And even when it's turned on, usually people end up turning it off again
Right.
pretty soon. Is that their plans to make that more useful?
You mean to
Full text indexing for this?
I'm actually, off the top of my head, I'm not aware that we're investing a lot in the index server in IAS. There is, we have the SharePoint team services. It's a pretty simple, first pass at organizing documents when you're sharing them. The portal server is a place where they're investing in search, so that when you take a bunch of SharePoint team sites and combine those together, you use the. In fact, I think the indexing guys are now working in that team. And so their work is around search in an organization connected with documents. So that work I'm aware of. We are going back and scrubbing the code to make it so that you can turn it on with a little more confidence. But that is a point, by the way, in the .NET Server, we are configuring everything off by default. IAS is off by default, and the first thing you discover is it breaks a bunch of applications. But we are reducing the attack surface to a minimum by default, and you can turn things back on. Security, we can make no compromise around security, and that's, we're essentially making the choices our customers want us to make now. So, Dan?
Curiosity, that hook for antivirus stuff. How do you protect that to make sure that it's only antivirus software that's touching that rather than...
That's touching which? The infrastructure I talked about?
Yeah, so you don't want a virus to be able to look at all the traffic that's coming in and out.
Yeah, but that's really... and I should be clear, that antivirus infrastructure is really just making it easier to access the same infrastructure that's there today, right? And that comes back to, I think, secure Windows, where you basically say, I'll only run things that are signed that I trust, right? But the hardware boots up, and before you get outside the hardware, it's got a certificate in it, and it can check the signing of the first few components that then check the signing of everything else, right? So I think stuff in the kernel, and we actually, we check signing of all drivers in the kernel today, but we don't, we will go ahead and boot even if it's not. But this is like that transition I was talking about for run by admin. You got to work your way through it and get everybody to adapt, and then you get hardcore.
So it's like a driver. It's for drivers.
Yes, it is. It's only I think it's entire. Well, actually, you know what? I think that one of the things it does is it lets you have user mode code instead of all in a driver. But if you want to ask detailed questions on David Gold, do you know David Golds? David Golds, D. Golds, is the guy who knows more about that than anybody else at Microsoft. Okay? Yeah?
So there's a number of places where you butt up against things like, say, Indigo and various other activities going on at the user level of .NET. Could you talk some about the challenges you see in those boundaries? Yeah,
our interaction with Indigo to date has really been on a couple of fronts. One is working with security infrastructure. And in fact, the teams have been spending a lot of time together. Now, I'll tell you what, when these guys say, oh yeah, we've been working with them, I never accept that as an answer. I just don't know where they've gotten yet, because I know that there were, conflicting ideas about, what the right security infrastructure. The Indigo team was being very innovative, and then my team was probably being overly conservative, based on 10 years of hard knocks. But you got to find the right balance in between to have more flexible infrastructure. The other place is with Hailstorm. And Hailstorm, we're already working with those guys to ensure, basically, see Indigo as the base on which the Hailstorm services are built. Hailstorm is one of these things that was built before pieces existed. There's some areas where standards exist now that didn't, and they did some inventing, and infrastructure in the company does, and we'll go through before it delivers, lining that stuff up, and that'll be good. It's got a lot of innovative things. It has built uniquely and built in terms of momentum in the industry and understanding of platform and the schema for scalable services like that, that I think are going to be the key things that we preserve in an updated infrastructure. Gideon?
You mentioned the issue of federating directories. Are you familiar with Butler Lamson's work? He has a video lecture someplace in the library here.
He has a what?
There's an old videotape lecture of Butler Lamson on the directory service. It starts with the question, what happens if Digital buys IBM and the directories have to merge?
Right. I have not seen that video, but I I'll get it. We work very closely with Butler. Has spent a lot of time with us on our security work mostly, as opposed to our directory work. But we should take a look at that. Any more questions? In that case, thanks a lot.
Thank you.